Hi, I'm Metta Spencer, and I'm very eager today to have a conversation about Venezuela. And I've invited three Venezuelans to bring me up to date. One of them, I'll start with Angel Alvarez because I've known him the longest. Not well, but I hope to get to know him better. He is a trained peace researcher. He has a PhD in peace studies, and he lives here in Toronto. And so we ought to know each other, and I hope we will get to know each other better. But he is from Venezuela. And in Florida, we have Maria Puerta Rivera, but I think you use the name Puerta in the U.S., right? Is the way things are done in the U.S. Maria is a professor of political science in Florida. I think she and I both have in common the notion that really what we do is political sociology. And so she stays very much in touch with what's going on in her home country. She's lived in Florida for the last 5 years. And Alba Purroy, is actually in Caracas now. Is that a background of Caracas that I'm seeing there, Alba? Is it?
Yes.
Okay, so we see a little bit of your city, which I had never seen before. But at any rate, Alba is actually in Caracas now, and is by training and background and profession is a nutritionist. But for the last several years, she's been working as a peace organizer. The conflict between the Maduro government in Venezuela has continued, and many Venezuelans have fled the country because of the hardships that were already created by the, I would say, poor government economic policies, but also then even worsened, as I understand it, by the sanctions that have been imposed by the U.S. government to try to force some changes.
Mhm.
So I don't know. We had a conversation a year or so ago about the situation in Venezuela, and it's certainly not been resolved since then. I'd like for you to go about it this way. Angel, if you give us kind of your own view of what has happened and what the position of the Canadian government should be.
We have an elected government in non-democratic elections. Maduro was elected in an election with no participation of the opposition. And he has not been recognized, but the US and most of the Latin American countries do not recognize Maduro as a legitimate president. But also the European Union and some other countries do not recognize Maduro as the president of Venezuela. Nonetheless, he is the president. In fact, he is the president. He has the power to make decisions and impose those decisions on the population and in the territory. On the other hand, we have a government that I try to hesitate. I tend to hesitate to call it government. I prefer to call it opposition, but they call themselves government, that is led by the president of the National Assembly. And they decided that given the fact that Maduro's government is a de facto government, they elected or nominated, actually appointed the president of the National Assembly as supposedly the government of an interim government that is about to end at the end of this year, the term of that government, I would say. So we have a country where there is two different political organizations that call themselves government. One of them have political power, military power, and capacity to repress and impose the policies. The other one has not this power in the territory, but is recognized by many governments in the world, democratic governments in the world. In the middle of this chaotic situation, because I would say that the main adjective that we can use to qualify Venezuelan situation is chaos. Venezuela is in the middle of a chaos politically. We have a government, the Maduro's government, that has been unable to implement one single efficient policy, not in the economic realm, neither in the social field. I would say that the only field in which Maduro has been able is in the political repressive order. So Maduro has been very efficient repressing and putting people in jail. And I don't mean only the political leader of the opposition. I would say that the most important consequence of the Venezuelan authoritarian regime has been suffered by the common people in Venezuela. We have a deep violation of human rights in Venezuela. People have been executed.
Excuse me, you're saying that this has gone on a while. This was a pretty repressive regime.
Yes.
For years.
Yes.
How long now?
Well, I would say that once Chavez died, I have to answer this question adding some information. Chavez was able to govern basically in three main bases. One of them was his own charisma. Chavez was a very charismatic, popular leader. So he was able to convince people, to gain support from the people, and even to lead people to postpone their own needs because they supported Chavez. The second base of this of the Chavez regime was a huge amount of money due to the high prices of oil. So the government was extremely inefficient, but economic policies, the Chavez economic policies were extremely inefficient, but he was able to finance his inefficiency. And the third instrument of political order in Venezuela has been repression. So Chavez was also repressive, but he didn't need to repress that much because he had his own charisma and a lot of money. When he passed away, obviously Chavez, the charisma of Chavez was personal, so he cannot transmit it. He wasn't able to transmit this charisma to Maduro. And Maduro is not a charismatic leader at all. He is boring. He is not unable to communicate properly with people. And on the other hand, the death of Chavez coincided with a deep economic crisis, with the oil price crisis. So we have a huge economic crisis. We have a president without charisma. So the only instrument that Maduro had at the particular moment when he was elected was repression. And since the economic situation has not improved,
I want to get clear in my own mind. Maduro's there was an economic crisis.
Yeah.
How much of this was caused by, let's say, Chavez's reckless, I want to use my own language, recklessly left-wing economic policies?
I would say that this is the whole explanation of the whole thing.
There's a whole.
So yeah, I would say that Chavez destroyed the economic apparatus of
Now, I
Venezuela.
would say right now, my guess is that most Canadian peace activists were basically in favor of Chavez.
Yeah.
Because he was sort of leftist. I mean, that's all
Mhm.
they needed to know. He
Mhm.
was sort of leftist and or very leftist, and that's good enough for my friends. And that's
Yeah,
what they need to
yeah.
know, because
I tend to agree with that point. This is the position of many leftist people in the world. But I have to tell you, if I have to choose a position, I will put myself on the left too. But we have left efficient government, and we have very inefficient leftist government. So, for instance, the government of Bachelet was a left government, and he was a very efficient. The government Lula da Silva in Brazil, it was corrupt at the end, but it was efficient at the same time, and it was a left government. And we can mention many of them. Even the two governments of Korea in Ecuador were very efficient, and the second one was less efficient than the first one. But we cannot say that the Korea's government was characterized by inefficiencies and misconducts in the economic realm. But it was not the case of Chavez. Chavez was leftist, extremely leftist, it's true,
but he bungled.
but also extremely inefficient.
Yeah, and he bungled the thing and made people's lives miserable.
Exactly.
Is that an overstatement?
No, that's correct. I will say that it's correct.
So
And
they really
most of
did need, I guess what I want to get to is early on when Maduro took over, he inherited bad economic policies and continued them, but has only been able to affect them by using repressive means, where Chavez didn't have to use those means because he was so popular.
That's correct. This is my point.
Okay.
This is my argument.
But a change was needed.
Yeah.
And are we? Is that a consensus here, or am I making this? This is my interpretation. Is it? Would it? Almost everybody in Venezuela agree to what we've just said?
Well, I will say that most Venezuelan common people will say that they don't know exactly what happened, but the real issue is that they are starving. So if they are starving and the private economy in Venezuela is a tiny portion of the total economy, most of the most important, I would say the most important industries in Venezuela are in the hands of the government and are controlled by the ruling party. If the economy is doing badly, it is a consequence of political decision made by the government, not by the private sector. So Venezuelan private economy is totally controlled by the government. It's over-regulated. We don't have market. We don't have competition at all. The government decide prices, control the banks, control I would say that the economic disaster that is happening in Venezuela right now is only the consequence of the Chavez's policies, but also the continuation and the deepening of these policies by Maduro.
I really, I mean, I do agree with that. I think there was a political project that, even though at the beginning was not labeled as a socialist project, because it was more like a military movement that evolved into this mix with leftist, more progressive people. And at the end, they embraced the whole socialist theme. Um, it was pretty much a political project that was aiming at absolute control of the state, institutions, and the economy. But this wasn't nothing new for us, because the economy was, during the democratic period, was also pretty much in the hands of government. It's just that they allowed for private enterprises, to flourish, because there was enough oil revenue to, um, make that move. What happened when Chavez decided to, nationalize, and his policy of just shutting down private initiative, so he could have not only control through regulation, but also through ownership. That at first he sold it as, workers would be in charge, but that was not true. He framed the whole thing as workers, being their own bosses, but that didn't work, because they failed at it. So he destroyed the whole economy, not just the one they controlled as government, because they control the oil industry, but they also destroyed the private initiative. So that's why you have the hunger. That's why you have all the chaos that Angel is describing, because there is nothing. They destroyed that because of a policy that was designed to do so. This is not an accident, as much as, there's some incompetence, but also a need to control, and to this is social control, really. There is a lot of social control under these policies that some people think they're just sloppy. Not at all. I think there is a lot of purpose in them to just control people. They used to control people through violence, criminal violence. Now they're controlling people through hunger. So it makes sense at some point.
Okay,
That's totally true. And I would like to add, would like to add just a piece of information. A long time ago, when Chavez was still alive in the government, his most important minister, who is now in the opposition to Maduro, said at that particular moment, he was a prime minister, and he said, there will never be socialism in Venezuela without poverty.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I see the same. I mean, I agree with all of you. I mean, with Angela and with Maria. I will add just, I think, well, we are now in a huge crisis, because not only all the reasons that they gave before, I think now this government has been completely inefficient in all the fields, and has been all inefficient for themselves also, for keep themselves in the power, even when they are in the power and they have the control and they have the power in fact. But some of the people who at the beginning were their followers are now disappointed. Many people, when Chavez passed away, decided to follow the government of Maduro, because they thought it was like a heritage from Chavez. So they follow the son of Chavez, and they started to accompany this government. But right now, I would like to say that many people from the grassroots who in the beginning followed Chavez is now completely disappointed with things, how it's handled right now. And one of the things who has been really critical is how has been the pandemic handled this year, because we have been lockdown for 7 months right now, and in the middle of this, we have been in a lack of fuel, fuel for
Mm-hmm.
for the transportation and for everything here. And it has been two critical points for this situation right now with the people, because people has been locked down in their homes without enough food, and in parallel with not all the health security appliance available for people, with no clear information about how it has been managed the pandemic situation. I mean, in terms of new cases, and also how many people has death for these causes, and also people have to be locked because they don't have public transportation, because lack of fuel. So there has been really a mess. Sorry, but it has been really a mess. How has been this managed in this last 7 months?
Yeah, Alba, could I ask why you say there's such a shortage of fuel? Because if there's no gasoline, that's going to affect the whole economy. You can't deliver food to people if you don't have the gasoline for the trucks and things.
Yes.
So the real question now to me is, who's to blame for that? If I mean, nobody's can be blamed for the germs, the viruses, but what is, if there's no gasoline, this may be caused, who are you going to blame for this? Is it the government's fault? Is it the sanctions put on by the US that have caused the shortage of gasoline? How do you apportion the blame for that particular aspect of the problem?
Well, I would say, Metta, from perhaps international point of view, it's easy to blame this situation only to sanctions. But I think it is a shared blame, because the destruction or the collapse of the oil industry is something which is not new. This is something which belongs 10 years ago, something like that. Because in 2000, I'm sorry, Maria and Angel, if you can help me with this, when
2002.
2002. So imagine that. So it was 18 years ago when the oil industry started to go down, because many people was I'm sorry, the word in English, I don't remember how.
The strike.
Fire.
The strike.
Fire. Yeah,
Yeah.
she said, she's trying to say that the oil workers lead a strike against Chavez.
Yeah.
Because Chavez was trying to take control over the industry.
Yeah.
The industry was a state, a government-owned industry, but it had some autonomy from that. I would say the manager has some autonomy to make decisions on marketing, on exploration, on investment.
Yeah.
And Chavez tried to control the industry. It was for his point of view, as Maria said a few minutes ago. From his military point of view, it was impossible to accept that a crucial part of the Venezuelan economy has autonomy from the military government. So he tried to control the industry. The strike started, and he ended up firing 20,000 workers, which include
20,000 workers.
It was 89% of the workers, which includes managers, technicians.
He did it over TV.
Exactly, and he did it by TV.
Over TV.
And using over TV and using social media. So he fired this amount of people, and I have to tell you, Mira, and to your audience, that we had 4 refineries in Venezuela.
Yes.
So we not only produce oil, we refine oil, and we exported gasoline.
Yes.
Not only oil, also
Yes.
gasoline.
Yeah.
And it lasted only 5 years.
We
In
didn't
5 years, these 4 refineries disappeared, and we started to import gasoline.
Guess who?
And we started to import
sold
gasoline
the gas
from Argentina, which is not an oil producer country. We started to import oil from Spain, which is not an oil producer country, which is absolutely crazy. So, and we started to import gasoline from the US, and for a long time, there was a very good business for Venezuelan importers and for the U.S. oil companies to sell gasoline to Venezuela.
Yeah.
But when the sanctions were imposed, obviously the amount of gasoline that came to Venezuela, that is coming to Venezuela, dramatically reduced as a consequence of the sanctions. But I have to tell you, if we had these 4 refineries, we wouldn't have facing this crisis.
But there's
because
something,
we will have enough gasoline in.
But
in
if there's an example for that, is that we are actually, or Venezuela is actually buying gas from Iran, who is under sanctions by the U.S. So that tells you that that's an excuse. If they would have, taken care of the oil industry, Venezuelans wouldn't be suffering because of lack of gas.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. Because and I have to tell, Iran is under sanctions. It has been under sanctions for a longer time than Venezuela.
Yes, that is true too. Yeah.
What did they do wrong? What was so hard about managing the refineries that they collapsed? And at what point did that happen? I'm sorry, I didn't take down a memory of when this. It was after
they fired the almost all the know-how. They got rid of the know-how.
This was still under Chavez when this.
Yes.
Yes.
So and the reason is simple. They replace technicians by were not technicians. I have to give you examples. They decided to appoint energy industry that had no any background in oil. Absolutely. So, for instance, they decided to appoint energy ministers and presidents and directors of the industry, people who had experience as union leaders or social activists or educators, professors, but no background in oil business.
Absolutely.
And I would like to add something to this comment. Also, Metta, something which was really bad for this is the oil industry. I think change their main objective in between, because it becomes the main money box for social programs in Venezuela. So it was the main resource to cover all the social programs in Venezuela. So they changed the main objective or the main goal from this huge and valuable industry to only keep the followers of Chavez among the social programs. It was not really bad for the country. I must say, many people was really identified with this and was happy with this, because for first time, perhaps in their life, they became with another structure or another quality of life in their own conditions, and they started to perhaps to receive some benefits, and they started to build a new relationships and new structures in their communities situation. But if we can manage to keep some of this structure, but with another focus in order to democratize this structure, I would like to say it would be an advantage for this in the future as a country, because they managed to do a huge work in this sense.
I tend to agree with you that the different programs that Chavez implemented through the oil company were aiming to produce some kind of social change, and had some positive social impact at the beginning. But they were basically clientelistic programs instead of social programs. So they were delivered by the government, implemented by the government in order to capture people and to transform them into political activists. So this was one of the first, the most important failures of these programs. But the second one is that in order...
I want to, I don't know whether you're agreeing with each other, because I thought Alba was basically saying this was mostly a good initiative when Chavez did it, and it had many benefits. But I hear you saying, Angel, that you don't think so.
I don't think so. Actually, it had some social impact. Instead of for instance, you can see that the social indicator of Venezuela, and for a few years, there was an important reduction of poverty. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But the side effect of these policies were, in the first place, they were political driven. So they were implemented to control population, not to make the population freer, and to make to increase to reduce the level of poverty, or to increase the income of the poor population. They were basically oriented to control, to political control, to impose political control on voters, and to transform the target of that policy, into political activists, into members of the political party. Yeah. And the second and most important consequence is that they were implemented mainly by the oil company, many of them. So the oil company became not only an oil company, but also a developer of urbanism, a company that built buildings and houses, a company that bought and distribute food and medicines. So it has not this is not a problem at all if you see that in a general way, but the consequence is the inefficiency. The first thing that we have to say is that the company was not designed to implement those policies. But the worst part is that they never hired the most efficient people to implement those policies, but only political activists that implemented these policies, but with a lot of corruption and inefficiency. So it worked at the beginning for a few years, because the amount of money that the oil company had and the amount of money that Chavez controlled was humongous. Was 7 or 5 or 6, 7 or 8 times the amount of money invested in euro to rebuild euro after the Second World War. So 7 or 8 Marshall plans. So it was a huge amount of money, and it was spent in a very inefficient and corrupt way. I wouldn't say that the intentions were bad. They were good. Actually, Venezuela was in a very critical situation when Chavez was elected. Otherwise, Chavez would not win the elections.
Yeah.
So we have poverty, we have inequality. All of that is right. But Chavez was not able to solve this problem. Actually, he only fixed this situation for a few years because his programs were very inefficient, were based in an amount of money that was impossible to sustain in the long run. And he destroyed the source of the money that was needed to maintain those policies, that is the oil industry in Venezuela. So if he destroyed that, at the end, he was the failure of his own social policies.
Okay, so Chavez messed up, although with good intentions. Transferred upon death, everything was inherited by Maduro, who wasn't as talented, who continued the same bad economic policies, but had to use coercion more because he was not as popular, and really it became a disaster economically, and people were suffering hunger even. And there was every reason. Here's where we get to the real question. Did you really need a different change of government? And if so, did the Guaido people have a plan that would have been an improvement over the economic plans of Maduro? Should the world generally have supported the, I don't want to call it an insurrection, but alternative proposals? Should the world support Guaido? Should they have done so in the first place? And if in any case, should they continue to do so? Because over the last year, there have been some changes. What should we outsiders support? And what are the options available? Maybe if we still cannot reasonably support Guaido, what else is on offer? What other possibilities might be worth considering?
If you ask me what the foreign governments, democratic foreign governments, should do in order to help Venezuela to find a solution, I would say that they have to put a lot of pressure on both Maduro and Guaido in order to find a room for negotiation and to implement a peaceful and democratic electoral transition to democracy in Venezuela.
Would you say that most people in Venezuela would agree with you on that?
I'm not sure. I would say that probably there are at least 4 positions on the Venezuelan opposition. And there is one that is very vocal, that is claiming for a military intervention. I wouldn't say that this is the majority of the Venezuelan. It probably is just a minority, but they are very vocal on the social medias mainly. And there is a kind of support, tacit support for Guaido among other people. And there is a kind of middle ground between these two positions that otherwise I would say that the majority right now is very concerned about their own issues, hunger, the scarcity of mostly everything from gas to medicines. And in the middle of the COVID situation, I would say that most people is basically focused on their own businesses.
Alba, you live there.
Yes.
So you've got the finger on the pulse better than maybe anybody else. What is your impression of public opinion? Of course, as I understand it, a lot of the population has left the country.
In one hand, there is interim government led by Guaido, which still has a really amount of followers still. Yeah, and it has been measured for one serious survey, which is real. Okay, but on the other hand, there is just a strong support to the government, which is no more than 20% of the population. This has been really measured. These are really hard data. But if we
wait a minute, I'm not sure I got it all. You would say 20% of the population still favors the government.
Yes, more or less. Yes.
And the other
80% is against the government.
80% is not necessarily all in favor of Guaido.
No. It's against the government, but not in favor of Guaido. Yes, that's true. Yes. Okay. But Guaido, as a leader, is the person who has the highest leadership right now. Okay.
Guaido is.
Guaido. Yes.
Guaido has
as
a strong proportion of support, but not 100% by any means.
As a single leader. Yeah. But this is what survey said. Okay. But when you check, I mean, the activists or the social movement and the social activists, and when we are in the social meetings, well, people is really confused. People is really not clear if we have to go or not to go for the parliament elections in the 2 next months. I mean, most of them are clear that there are no real conditions to go for these elections. But on the other hand, there are people who would like or who love to have some leadership to believe to go to this parliament election. What would I mean with this? What I mean with this? There are some people, or there are people who would like to fight with the elections or with some space to gain some space in this route, because there are people. When I say people, it's not people. I mean, in the professional level, I'm talking about also people from the grassroots, because I have been in this area and talking with people, because there are people who still believe in the power of the vote, and they want to vote, but they want to vote for something or for somebody who really wants to have the power to change, I mean, the situation. We are very confused. I think we need to talk a lot with people. I mean, we need to do a lot of social work face to face with people, because media is not, I mean, it's not allowed to the majority. People in the shanty areas, in the poor areas, they don't afford for social media like Twitter or something like this, because they don't have internet connection, they don't have smartphones. They many times or many hours during the day they don't have electricity, and some urban areas neither. I mean, doesn't have electricity. So what I mean is the information. I mean, the flow of information is really poor.
In general, who do they blame for their plight?
No, they blame the government.
I think
no doubt about this. They blame the government.
I think this is important, because one thing is to kind of demand leadership, which is my perspective from abroad. I have family in Venezuela, and they are going through a very, very hard time for the first time in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have gas, they don't have food,
mm-hmm.
They can't, it's the minimal, the survival mode they're on. And we're talking about people that 6-7 months ago, they were okay, they were fine. They didn't need us to supply anything, because they had everything. And all of a sudden, we've started this year, after 5 years here, we've started sending food. This is a first time for us. So I think most of the people don't understand that Venezuelans' lives changed from one moment to the other, but they were already, maybe not the whole population, but they were already going through a very hard time. The problem is that right now it's 90% of the population. So of course they blame the government, but there's also this sort of orphanage of leadership from the opposition, because unfortunately the promises that were made over very flimsy, basis. There was nothing there for them to offer, not even to go as far as to change the regime, which is unrealistic. That's the problem. There's a void of leadership, and they're not going to fill it with the government, of course.
I think one of our main challenge now is to change this public opinion to put this in a binary way. I mean, you win or you lose, you lose or I win. We as a civil society, we are working, or we are really trying to work hard on this, to change this and to put the main actors together to try to find an agreement for this, for a fair elections and for a pacific solution for this. I think it's not only Maduro as a Maduro. We need to manage many things around it.
If you have to make many changes, it's not just getting rid of Maduro. Then how do you get there? For one thing, it seems from where I sit that these people are locked in to an opposition, and that this is not changed.
Yeah.
Am I right? That the opposition has not moved. There's been no action to resolve it. It's just stuck. And is there any way of putting external efforts to bring into some change? Who could help? Maybe Canada could put its influence in a good direction. There is this Lima group.
I think the Lima group is important, and that's why I believe that Canada's role within the group is really important, to try to establish some sort of balance between those countries that are on the extremes. Why? Because I believe that diplomacy, negotiation, those are the ways that we might find a way out of this stalemate. There's a stalemate. On the one side, there's the Maduro regime, which is, pretty much in good shape compared to the interim government that has a deadline in January of next year. They are up, there's probably a parliamentary election. They might be out of government. They're trying to figure out what to do. But the fact is that Maduro is not going to is not going to allow them to go further. So I think Canada's role in the group, in the Lima group, is going to be important if they try to strike a balance between the radicals on the group, or if the ones who are in opposing sides, but also to foster some conversations, even with the United States. It will depend on who wins the election, but regardless of that, there has to be a way to use diplomacy instead of this, constant threatening to use, military power or responsibility to protect. I mean, that I think is not realistic. I don't believe that is going to benefit the people. People need to have something to hold on to. And those are hopes that are very much in the abstract sphere. There's no a real solution if you don't just point to things that are maybe incremental. We can't hope for Maduro to just leave power and that's it. That's not going to happen. That's not realistic. It has to be incremental. You have to get people on the same page. let's talk, let's negotiate. It's going to be hard. You will have to concede some things that you might not agree with, but I think that's where
The
this
way.
would be heading.
Alba, yes.
Yes. Yes, I would like to add to this. I agree with Maria. And also, I think the most important now, I think we need help from, I mean, abroad, from institutions or from governments or leaders or actors who are really decided to support us as a peace builder, as a peace maker, but not only with the leadership, with the main actors of this conflict. I think we need also to go deeper in the society, in the middle areas, and also in the grassroots. That's why, for example, my main objective right now is I'm working with women as a peace builder. I'm training women as a peace builder now with all these tools, but looking for a pacific solution and looking through these different levels of the society, not only the top of the actors of this. Of course, they have more influence, but we need to go inside of all the society.
I wonder one thing, I think in Canada and maybe around the world, there's more support for Maduro than I would expect because simply because of the position that Trump has taken. And if Biden comes in, what difference will it make? Maria, you may have some sense of that. I don't know that I haven't heard anybody ask Biden a question about his position on Venezuela.
No, he has. He has a plan.
Can
He has
you
a plan.
explain what changes we can expect from him?
Well, first of all, Biden thinks that Maduro is a dictator. So that's a starter for those who doubt about his intentions and those who label him as a socialist. That's really, for starters, his position is quite clear. Now, he has expressed his leaning towards negotiation. He doesn't believe that the intervention style of the Trump administration is rendering any, benefits to the cause of democracy in Venezuela. He's been very clear about that. He thinks there has to be an approach towards, first of all, recognizing that that's not a democratic regime. He's quite clear about that, but that they have to establish some sort of communication. And he has expressed his intention to promote those talks, and that there should be free and fair elections. That's basically his approach to the whole situation. That this has to end in a fair call for elections with a new electoral body that calls for those elections. So it's a very long-term proposal. This is not something that we're going to see in 1 year or two, but at least it's a little bit of a shift from the Obama administration, which was very cautious and very distant. This is a more, I believe it is a more clear proposal. I'm not sure that's going to be well accepted by those who want military intervention, of course, and that's why you hear the other side saying that we need more. But I think Biden is a little bit more, realistic in terms of what he can actually do, or his administration.
Okay, well, how does that sit with people? You're in Florida, which is largely Hispanic. much more Hispanic than other parts of the country. And I wonder, how is he appealing to those voters? Is that
to the Cuban American voters and the Venezuelan American voters? No. He is appealing to other Hispanic Latinx voters, like, for example, Puerto Ricans, because they don't have that immigration socialist kind of conflict. They're Americans and they don't fear socialism. So Biden's appeal probably is a little bit stronger among Puerto Ricans, and they make up for 1,200,000 electors here in Florida. So I guess I've always, discussed with my Venezuelan colleagues that I think there is an exaggeration with, how strong the Venezuelan American vote is here in Florida. It doesn't even reach 60,000 votes. It's 55,000 votes. And, it's good if elections here are very close. The margins are very, close. But if I were Biden, I would be investing a lot more in Puerto Rican voters than Venezuelan voters. They already have their minds made up, and it's Trump's.
How Cuba, a Canadian and Cuban coalition, so to speak, could have any influence on policies in Venezuela, because Cuba is clearly supporting the Maduro government and Canada is not. So somebody elaborate on how you visualize a thing like that working out.
Cuba government has been supported Venezuelan government since 20 years in different fields. And Cuba government and Venezuelan government has been exchanging different things in this relationship: security forces, intelligence, healthcare, medical care, and many things. And it has been an exchange between Cuba and Venezuela, also with, they have trade, also exchanging oil with resources from Cuba. We need a negotiation to go to a transition in Venezuela. We think governments who are close to Cuba could be or could have a great role to talk with Cuba government in order to facilitate this process. This is the case I would suggest could be managed by a Canadian government in this case. Okay.
Say the Canadian government and Cuba get together and propose, urge really free and fair elections, which is what everybody agrees would be necessary, and that it might not be that anybody from either the Maduro government or Guaido's group would be elected, but some other group that you would hope would be more efficient in running the economy. Who might that be? Are there, in such a situation that has been so polarized for so long, is there any credible third party kind of group, political entity that could run candidates for election and be credible?
Not yet. Good question.
Yeah. Okay.
Good question. Well, I think there is not yet.
I would say that the most important problem that the Venezuelan opposition is facing right now is fragmentation. They are strongly divided. Mm-hmm. They used to be pretty well unified. It worked really well until 2015, when the opposition won the majority of the National Assembly. and they remain unified for a long time. But now they are fragmented in at least three different positions. One of them, which is the Guaidó position, that claims for a kind of transitional government, that nobody knows how this government will be imposed and how we can reach to this solution. There is the position of Maria Corina Machado and other people who claim for a foreign intervention. Some of them are pretty clear about a military intervention. Some others are a little bit more ambiguous and claim for a international intervention without adding the military part of that. But at the end, I think everybody knows that the proposal is a military intervention, which I reject. And there is in the between them, there is a position led by Enrique Capriles, who used to be a candidate. He was a candidate who ran against Chavez in 2012 and against Maduro in 2013. And he almost won the election. I will say that he almost won the election because he lost for less than 1 point percent. It was a very, very close election. And some people claim that he actually won and it was a fraud, but nobody can prove it. But the real point is that he is leading a third position that tried to reach an agreement with trying to get the support from the international community and actually with some support from the European Union and particularly Norway. And as for the Canadian government role in this situation, I will say that Canada can play a very important role relating to crucial international actors in Venezuela. There is no solution in Venezuela without the intervention of the US and Cuba. Both governments are strongly interested in Venezuela, much more Cuba than the US, to be sincere. But there will be no solution in the Venezuelan situation. Is Cuba is not has not involved in this process of negotiation, and at the same time, if the U.S. is keep using Venezuela as an instrument of domestic confrontation, which is the main role of the Venezuelan issue in this current presidential election of the U.S. I don't think that Trump is concerned about what is happening to Venezuela and Venezuelans. He is using Venezuela as an instrument to condemn and to attack the liberal Democrats and that he calls the socialist Democrat in the US. But he is not interested in any solution. So I would say that after this presidential election, whatever happens in it, I would say that Canada and other democratic countries in the world have to put a lot of pressure on the US to find a peaceful solution in Venezuela and to convince Cuba not being an obstacle in this democratic transition. And if you ask me, I would say that I will try to find the support of those leaders who are in the middle between those who claim for international intervention and the other who asks for interim government. And I would say that people like Capriles, or there are many other people in Venezuela who can play an important role in order to find this kind of negotiated agreement for a peaceful transition.
Well, this sounds like the most, doesn't sound like a very optimistic scenario, but the most promising that I've heard so far. You know, and everybody's nodding, as if you don't settle for that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. This is
Thank you, Metta,
very
for having us
enlightening,
here.
and it's not encouraging exactly, but it's, we can keep our fingers crossed.
Thank you for
Thank
giving
you.
this opportunity,
Thank you, yeah.
to communicate with Canadian people
Yes.
regarding the problems in our country, and to contribute for to find a peaceful solution for Venezuela in this crisis.
Thank you, Metta, for this invitation, and thank you to your audience.
Good wishes to Venezuela. Give our
Thank you very much.
okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good night, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
This conversation is one of the weekly series Talk About Saving the World, produced by Peace Magazine and Project Save the World. Please visit our website at tosavetheworld.ca, where you can sign the Platform for Survival, a list of 25 public policy proposals that, if enacted, would greatly reduce the risk of 6 global threats to humankind. Come back next week for another discussion of a serious global issue.